I'm here.
Harmon,
Here.
Gorski,
Here.
Kramer.
Here.
Okay, so we have a vacancy, or we don't actually have a vacancy, so we have an absence with Chief Romanelli, who's retiring today. Everybody else should be confirmed at the May meeting, and then we'll make the changes in the seats for Gorski, for Dina, et cetera, et cetera. So you have a quorum, sir?
All right, thanks, Linda, and welcome to everybody to the PAC meeting. Item number 3, the chairman's remarks. I don't have any right now. Item 4, public comment. I don't see anyone from the public.
No public comment.
Public comment. We're on up to item number 5, the consent items, which is the approval of the minutes from the emergency ETS policy action committee from Monday, April 5th, and the special call on Monday, April 19th. Can we take those together?
I believe you can do that in the radio maintainer report since they're consent items, if you'd like.
Yes, would love that. So let's also include item 5B, the radio maintainer report. If we can get a motion to place those items on file with a second, please.
So moved. Second.
Who was the first?
I think, Steve, you were first, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I wasn't looking up. All right, so motion to receive and place on file consent items, approval of minutes and radio maintainer report. Member Gorski,
Aye.
Harmon,
Yes.
Member Hayden,
Yes.
Member Kramer.
Aye.
Okay,
Okay. Item 6, the DDoS portable and mobile replacement conversation. And we've been briefly discussing encryption. We're not gonna make any decisions, of course, because we have new members that are gonna be appointed. At the next ETS board meeting, correct, Linda?
yes,
Okay, so with that in mind, let's just continue discussing it and at least gathering information that we could take back to our member agencies. So with that, Matt, can I call on you to move this discussion along? I know there were some items from last month that we talked about.
Yeah, so Linda went out and got us some toys to play with, I guess. I guess I will try to make this so you guys can see it. So this is the Apex Next. It's about the size of my cell phone.
Oh,
with a short antenna.
Short antenna.
Sold, right?
The big advantage of this is one of Morrow's newest radios. One of the biggest advantages of this is it has a Smart Connect feature, which means if I'm out of range of the radio network, it can then use an LTE or a cell phone network to still talk in the same talk groups. Kind of like the Wave app does, it's integrated into this device. We just started playing with it. It does have voice command, so I can press a little button. It's a little different than your cell phone. It's just not always listening. You have to press a button and say, change channel police.
what do you have to say?
You can say change channel, and then you can say the channel that you want to change to. So change channel Starcom demo. And then it changes the talk group on the screen without changing a knob. You still have to press a button. It's got GPS in it, so you can look at where other Apex Next radios are in the local area. You can text message back and forth, so some of the features you have on a cell phone, this radio is capable of doing. Those are kind of the big highlights. I mean, there's a ton of stuff in the radio. It's a little bit different form factor. It's got the same buttons and knobs, shorter antenna, emergency buttons a little different on the top. But overall, it looks like a Motorola radio. It's just a little smaller. It fits really in the size of my hand like a cell phone would.
That's the law enforcement radio, Matt?
This is the law enforcement. They do make an XE, a green fire radio version. It looks really the same. It is just green, and it has the ruggedization. You know, with a bigger screen, I do worry a little bit about that in the fire, but I think once we review the specs and stuff to see what temperatures and stuff like this has been tested to. So I think there's some still playing with it, but I think this is the maybe baby step into that next technology like the board member
Industrial?
is asking for, because this does use the cellular network. You know, if I remove the antenna, I will go out of radio range. It'll take a moment, but then it will click over here and say 4G, and I can still key up.
Okay. And so on the law enforcement side, it's a single band. On the fire side, it's going to be a dual band.
Yep, and on the fire side, that just means your antenna's a little longer.
Figures.
Not bad though. I know you guys can't really see our size comparison, but police versus fire.
So we are working on getting a ruggedized version of this for the fire folks to take a look at also. So in a case that Matt has is a form and spec sheets, and right now we'll start with police and send that around. So we'll get that to a police department. There's on the form, we're looking at date requested, name and initials who got it, who you want for contact. So as we're sending information out, the agencies who they'd like additional contact to go to. So it's, contact, email, phone number, and then we're just going to ask people to pass them from agency to agency, which is why there's a list in there, so that, if you're in Carroll Stream, you're looking, obviously you're going to pick the agency next closest to you and dish it off to the next one, and keep it for about 2 days to take a look at it and send it on to the next place so we can get it around for everybody to look at. And there's 2 in there, so.
Okay. On the ACDC side, would you please make Brandon the contact? And then Brandon loves responsibility, by the way. But then Brandon can make sure it's passed around to our agencies, and then on the fire side, we'll get a sample of each radio, right?
Yeah, Moto's working on getting us a case like this so we can get it out to the fire group. If we get it through police, we can start this one through fire, but I was hoping to wait to get something for fire so you can see what you're actually going to be using, and then make some choices, and then we'll look for feedback. But it has a nice spec sheet that'll be in there that you can either copy or email Eve, and she will email you a PDF version, email the contact person a PDF version.
Fantastic. Okay. And then, Matt, I don't know what you want to do on the DUCOM side.
I mean, you can start with me. If you want to get this to Brandon first, and then.
It doesn't really, I don't know that we have to go alphabetical. I mean, whoever wants to get it first and then just pass it around. I mean, it's certainly agency to agency, so.
So they're only going to give us one of each. Can we get a couple each, or?
Now we'll send the whole case around so you can play walkie-talkie and test it out a little bit.
Okay.
We're also looking at coverage. Moto should be giving us coverage maps for these at 12 dB so we can see what the coverage is. And so when we get those, we'll get those to you also.
Great. Sounds pretty good. Any questions about the portable radios that Matt got us for samples?
Sherman Hayden.
Yeah, hi, Steve.
Hey, what's the cost of these things? I think if I remember correct, those are the premium Motorola products, because some of us going to have to pay for these out of our own pocket too.
I don't know what There's not a model number.
I don't have pricing yet.
Okay.
I'm not sure why you would have to pay out of pocket.
Well, CSOs, records, right? Or is ETS anticipating purchasing it for everybody?
So, well, I guess there's some of it is, the short answer is I don't know. The second answer is you have Apex 7000s that can go out into the fleet to fill in some of those gaps until there's some decisions made. And that's the other question is I don't know if agencies are going to want this for patrol, or if they're just going to, on the fire side, for example, they may just decide command personnel for something this size, so I don't know until you tell us what you want to do from an agency preference. Right now, you've got Apex 8000 XEs in the system, you've got Apex 6000s in the system, and you have Apex 7000 and 7000 XEs in the system. So, the other issue we're running into is for the factory manual wards. So you have UL approved and you have FM approved. FM is an industry standard that's going out of service. So any radios we send in now will be repaired but not certified. That's not such a big deal on the police side, but on the fire side, it means they're not certified to go into a hazmat event. So we'll have to look at whether or not Motorola pays for the repair right now, so it doesn't hurt us to have them sent in and repaired. We just have to make sure they don't go into service in with somebody who's going to be in a hazmat situation. So we have, there's a couple of deltas here that are going to impact how we get everybody a radio.
Okay, so then I think I answered my next question, but I'll ask it anyway. So the issue of, and Lyndon, I emailed you earlier and you gave me a very good response, but I want to just bring it out, is the idea of going to a different vendor would then not really be considered because of ADP encryption if we stay with ADP. Is that right, Matt? So if we keep the existing 6, 7s, and 8s that are out there and move to this new product, we're on that ADP type encryption system, and that's proprietary to Motorola.
Correct. The ADP is proprietary Motorola.
Okay.
That doesn't mean you can't look at other systems, but that's for discussion for this group. But
Understood.
yeah, but that probably is a great segue into the sheet that was sent along in terms of continuing the encryption discussion. So at the last meeting, people were asking, we started talking about whether or not you wanted to use encryption and how you would use encryption. So we provided the group with a list of everybody from outside of Dieters who has asked for access to the system, so that will help you make some decisions on how you want this to lay out. I think probably the more, you have some significant issues in terms of larger possibilities with the trains, if you're encrypting main talk groups and things like that. So that was, I think, that was the discussion for today. I don't know, Matt, if you wanted to add anything to that.
Well, I mean, from everything I've read, the AES 256 is where we should go. From an encryption standpoint, it's really the federal recommendation. I do think we want to also keep ADP just to decouple issuing new radios to switching encryption, decouple the events. So if you put both of them in the new radio, it allows us to issue new radios, stay on the current TAC channels, and at a later date, upgrade the encryption in the system. It gives us access to the ITTF talk groups and items like that. So I think from what we've seen, that's really the encryption, we should be looking at least highly on the list to consider.
Okay. Yeah, you did a pretty good survey on that, Matt. Absolutely, the overwhelming majority are on the AES 256. So, I think the other issue is being able to communicate with fire. right?
Yeah, I mean, from a use, which talk groups do we want to encrypt? Are we encrypting dispatch channels? If you encrypt dispatch channels, I know fire wants to hear this dispatch channels, so we also have to provide encryption to fire radios. I think that's something we have to decide as well.
Okay, so, but that's, Linda, help me out here. It's not a decision we're gonna make today. It's just open for discussion.
Correct. I think you've got a lot of things to consider before you start making decisions as a group, but it's in looking at this outside access, what the impact would be on those outside agencies and their ability to connect. Now, that being said, in the time that we've done this, and I hate to jinx myself because as soon as I say nobody's really asked for connection, we'll test that theory. But so it's a lot of these are the when we need to. So other than places like probation, which are internal agencies and things like, and then you've got like Wheaton College and the malls. So internally, there's some agencies that we would have to look at in terms of their police and fire sponsors and how they want that access to go. And then you've got, well, Benedictine and Argonne and things like that, but then you have the outside. So, there's some things to consider there and what your preference is in terms of interoperability maybe start the discussion with the internal groups and where they should be in this discussion in terms of encryption and how that impacts the main talk group.
Okay, well, if we decide to encrypt, it's gonna be their option if they want to encrypt their radios or not. I mean, they want access. So, they'd have to follow along if they still want access. Is my feeling on it. Anybody else? Yeah, Dave.
Chief, could I ask a question going back on encryption for a second?
Hang on one second, Jim. Dave Shar had his hand up. I didn't even see it.
Sorry about that, Jim. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jumping away from encryption for a second, and if Matt could just address the new radio that they're sending out, where is that in its current life cycle? And how many years does Motorola plan on servicing and having parts available for this radio so we know what we're getting into before we make this major purchase?
So my understanding is this radio came out late in 2019. So it's one of the newer radios that they have released. There is a Apex 6000B version that is relatively in that same time frame, but I think that was maybe later 18. Motorola does kind of give us that 10-year expectation. But I don't know if they have a guarantee on that yet. That'd be something we have to follow up with Motorola on.
You can always count on them changing stuff up, so you have to buy things. I just figured that was worth it, information worth having. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. Jim?
Maybe I misunderstood the discussion on encryption before. Did I understand that there was no way to take existing radios and upgrade them to AES, or I thought that was an economic decision before? Do I have it correct or not?
You can buy the feature, but you have to buy the encryption flash code and install it on any existing radios that you want to do the AES 256.
That's right. So I guess just want to be clear. So the fact that you would have some legacy radios in the system, some of which you might want to encrypt and some maybe you don't, but if you wanted to encrypt them, it's technically possible and you could go to AES across the board. Is that correct, Matt?
Correct.
Thanks. I just want to make sure we're all thinking the same way. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. Appreciate that very much. Okay. Steve Heron.
Bill, so a question on the outside agencies. If I remember correctly, the new procedure is to give them a talk group, and then we patch the groups together. Is that right? They don't get our individual main channels. So like Aurora or Metra, they go to a general group, and if they need mutual aid, then dispatch patches them?
So correct, but there's only 8. There's 8 that we give them. We give them 8 talk groups. And then depending on which one's available when we need to patch, it's one of those 8.
And then if one of those channels is patched to a main talk group that's encrypted, then the encryption goes away.
Encryption doesn't go away, but it isn't carried forward on that patch.
Say that again, Matt.
The encryption doesn't go away, it just isn't carried forward on that patch. So
Okay,
that patch talk group's not encrypted, so they can't hear it, any encrypted audio.
okay.
Anyone else?
Could I raise a somewhat unrelated issue about radios and technology?
Yeah,
So I think you're probably aware of it, but NFPA has a new standard out for firefighter use radios, and it's a very, very challenging standard. I haven't seen Motorola come out yet to say they've got a time frame for their radios and mics to meet the standard. I saw the other day that Harris is supposed to come out in the next week or 2 with their radio that they say is compliant, but they still don't have the mic that's compliant. So just one more thing to factor in on a fire radio purchase that, and what Matt, I have no idea whether the APX Next is going to meet that standard as is or not. So just one more thing to put in your thinking. So, the challenge would be if you, let's say it was delayed to get radios that were NFPA compliant, then you could wind up buying radios that weren't compliant. As soon as you buy them, then you have technically a non-compliant radio, although nothing's mandatory to go backwards and retrofit. Or hopefully before this purchase is made, the new radios are compliant, or we would be able to purchase radios that are compliant. And of course, the big fear in the industry is because they have to meet such a rugged standard that the price is going to go up. But anyway, I just want to factor that in your thinking.
So I think getting back to Chief Heron's point for a minute, maybe what we'll do is go back to this list that you've been given and update who's got talk groups other than the interop, because there are a few. Wheaton College, for example, has Wheaton main, the talk group that the main talk group that Wheaton PD is on. So there are some crossovers because this is evolving. And, as you look at that access list, there are asterisks, and that means that at the time they did their application, we didn't ask that question. So we probably should go back to all of these agencies and say, do you still want interoperability, and answer these questions so that you have an idea of, and some of these are early adopters. So they may not care at this point, or maybe they do care. So we should, we can get that information for you then too.
So your office will do that one?
Our office will do that.
I think I said it, so I think I volunteered us. And nobody made eye contact, so sure.
Okay, Steve.
And then the other question too is these early adopters, because I know Oprah Mall's in there, some of those other ones. Isn't there a caveat in the MOU or the agreement that's made that if we change, they have to make a change? We have no obligation to maintain our standard because of their radio. I believe there used to be some language in, I'm sure there still is.
Yeah, I'd have to go back and look, but it's something like that.
Yeah, something like that, I remember. Yeah, okay. So I don't know that that should be a determining factor, but certainly something to consider.
I agree. All right. Moving on then, I don't know, in my opinion, I think the conversation is going to be encryption and radio features. And once we have those two things down, we'll be able to move pretty good. I'd still like to get this to the board by August. Matt and Linda, probably our two biggest issues, or is there something else out there I'm not aware of?
for me, it's picking a radio model and the feature sets of the radio.
Okay.
You know, if we do encryption, I think you want to do multi-key. I think those are go hand in hand. There's a bunch of other features. Obviously, once you pick a model, we can narrow down that feature set to what that radio is capable of. The encryption one's challenging from a standpoint of if you encrypt the dispatch talk groups. I think Chief Conley brings up the good point of you then have a cost to keep the old radios alive. You kept it status quo. There is not that cost. So I think some of that could be decided after selecting the radio. Some of it we probably want a good handle before we select the radio.
All right, well, we're gonna have another meeting in 2 weeks. ACDC is gonna move ahead, Brandon, and meet with our member agencies and start the discussion about DuCombat. Where's DuCombat on it?
So
Larger, a little bit more difficult to get through this.
So we're going to start a radio discussion of our tech group this week. Just talking about kind of the slides we went over 2 weeks ago, and start the discussion there.
Great. Okay. Well,
Well, can I ask a question for discussion for the group?
Yeah.
I think one of the things that will help us with encryption is because the couple of the issues are fire wants to monitor if fire, so monitor police main. So that's one impact to encryption. The other is not everybody on fire has a radio. So is it this board's preference and you know, and we can come back to it when it's the actual group seated, but you know, you're all there. So but this is the thing to think about. If you're all in agreement that we should correct the disbursement on the fire side to a mobile in every piece of apparatus and one per firefighter, then that allows us to go into an encryption discussion in a different way. Because if everybody on the fire side has a portable, then there's no reason to patch, which then changes TDMA and encryption. And then you still get a VHF radio because when you go visit your friends, when you do mutual aid to an agency outside the system and you need VHF, you can switch over. So I think that's probably the first thing that has to be decided by consensus as far as recommendation to the board, because it's if then, and that's probably the key. So that would be the point of discussion that kind of helps everything else flow, in my opinion. I think I know what fire people think.
I'm in.
it's going to be an easy question to answer, in my opinion. I'm all in favor of it, but we're not voting today, so I think that's going to be easy.
Linda, just for clarification, could you said one mobile per vehicle, and then you said one radio per firefighter. That's what you meant, right? Per head count, not per riding position.
Correct, because that's the gap you want to fill, right? I mean, we can dial it back to riding position if the board balks on the price tag, but that's where the current 7,000s come into play, because if we do the replacement and then use those and replace them as we go, that as they die, then we can eventually get everybody to that point with a new.
Okay. I'm following you. So just a couple things, just so we're again on the same page. I think one challenge, not that it's insurmountable, but you know, having if you have two totally different model radios, like a 7,000 and APX next in an agency, that could be challenging, but I think it's manageable. You know, I'm not sure I want them on my, you know, rigs at 2 o'clock in the morning with, what rate have I got today? But if it's assigned to an individual, if we get to that point, I think that's manageable. The other thing you said though is I'm not sure 100% in agreement. You said that if you give everybody a radio, which means everybody has Starcom, so like basically no VHF in the DuPage system, even though there will be a ton of VHF radios still out there. That doesn't necessarily eliminate the need for patching, because you were talking about outbound, which is correct, but inbound mutual aid uses patching all the time. That's how our neighbors talk to us when they come to us every day. So it doesn't solve that part of the problem.
It solves the TDMA problem though, in the sense of your mutual aid responders and fire won't be monitoring police radios, which impacts TDMA. So
Correct.
you might impact TDMA on the fire side when you have mutual aid on that talk group.
Yes. Yep. We're saying the same thing. Yep. You're 100% correct. Thank you.
We see that cross, we're paying for TDMA and we're not getting, well, this is really Matt's area of expertise, but go ahead.
Well, I mean, the other thing is any new radios we purchase have to have TDMA in them. So the problem will fix itself over time in somewhat. The question would be like the encryption question of, if we keep the fire radios, do we upgrade those to TDMA in fourth touch or whatever it is, right? We could do like what we did with police, and that problem also goes away to extent because the fire radio is TDMA capable, and the call can go TDMA even with fire listening to the police channel.
So we have TDMA licenses right now for the fire radios. We just haven't done it. So, there's roughly 1,500, I think, portables. So you'd have to do the mobiles that exist today, the Starcom mobiles that exist today, because those wouldn't need to be replaced necessarily right now. And then 1,500 plus whatever the impact is to get everybody on a radio. Then we take those Apex 7000 XEs and update them with encryption, with TDMA, with whatever else you decide for what we need. The rest go into storage to replace and use until they die, because it doesn't then make, once there's an issue with the 7000, it doesn't make sense at that point to repair them. We just take them out of service, use the next 7000 so we're out of 7000s. That then allows us to push the police side 7000s out to CSOs and all those other things. And then, while we work on those legislative challenges, because the radios right now, the existing radios have a depreciation value of 0, which means we can transfer that asset to an agency for 0 cost to make this work. We're still carrying airtime, but and then again on that side, on the 7000s, on the regular 7000s, on the police side, it's the same thing. Those that are in service, when we die, we take the cash, bring one back to life, replace it till we're out of 7000s. Then we go to the board and say we need to start replacing, and hopefully by that time some of those legislative issues are resolved.
All right,
Roughly.
Steve?
Well, sorry about this. So there's 2 questions that I have. Number 1 on fire. As far as the radios go, I would think that each firefighter would need a radio. I guess I would question, and I would ask the fire people, do you need them for all firefighters, including your paid on calls, or it would be full-time? That would be a question, an open-ended question. My second question, and I think you said this, Lynn, I want clarification, is that if we issue firefighters radios, it would have a direct impact on encryption? Or is that the correlation I got, that encryption, if we encrypt and we give firefighters radios, that would have some impact on what we would do? Or is that just because of our main talk groups?
So if you encrypt the main talk groups, then fire wants to listen, we would need encryption in the fire radios.
But they have a encryption key already. They just don't use it, right?
We have essentially a license, yes. They're not installed or used.
Okay.
All right. Any other discussion about encryption? All right, good discussion. We'll move on to item 7 then. It's old business. I don't have any.
Hold on. So are you giving staff direction? Like Matt and I do, and technical people to look at this to make recommendations with the perspective of if fire all had radios? So you're in agreement that the proposal that fire had in their survey slides is the one per firefighter, one per rig or piece of apparatus. And so going in that, what that means then, just so we can kind of give you some things to talk about.
Yes.
That's new, the soon-to-be people too. Nobody has I mean, we'll bring it back, but I just, it doesn't make sense to look at things you don't want to consider in terms of spending time. So, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's why we did the survey that way, because best case scenario, everybody gets a radio.
Right.
And I know it was kind of like, we didn't know where this was going. So that's why we did the survey that way, is kind of get us up to par or get everybody a radio. And I'm all in favor for getting everybody a radio.
And again, every firefighter would get one. So it would be each firefighter, not each rig, because right now it's by seat, right?
Correct.
And partially by that, because some agencies chose to got rid of one seat to get the mobile.
Okay.
Because it was 4 portables and then no mobile, or
That's
it was kind of a messed up situation. So we're trying to get up to speed where we're at. Addison, we chose to do 1 radio per employee. So we purchased a ton of extra radios.
Right.
So all of us got radios. So we just felt that it was important to do that. So
That's that Addison money.
you're still muted, Steve.
That's because I hit my mute button. Sorry. Is it 1 per full-time firefighter or any firefighter, whether they're paid on call or full-time?
You have to ask, on the survey, Jim, what did you count?
Excuse me. We counted everybody.
Because we've got like 40 paid on call, but only, a dozen, 18 full-time. So, I mean, that's a big number.
It is. And, there's certainly hybrid models where you could say, 1 per full-time. And if you're, part-time, it's, riding position. I mean, there's all kinds of ways to skin the cat. But the answer to Linda's question is, we asked the question of if every member, every firefighter and medic on your department was to get a radio, how many? And that was the number.
And I believe that each firefighter should have a radio, just as the law enforcement does. It just makes sense to me. Now, again, on the part-time model, that's something that you guys are going to have to come back with, because that's a huge amount. But I think it's easier to get to the end if we agree that each firefighter needs it, and however we're going to do part-timers is going to be up to you guys.
Well, I think that's where the current XEs come into play. To replace what we have today and then round out full-time and then use the 7,000 XEs for part-time. And then as they die, then we look at how we replace them, and it's not such a big bite.
I agree with that.
Okay, because I'm sorry, that just gives us some direction on which way we want to go. And thank you. Okay.
All right. Moving on to item 7 then. Old business, I don't have any. Does anyone else? Item 8, new business. I think we covered it all. Number 9, this next meeting is supposed to be May 17th, 9 a.m., May 17th, 9 a.m. And Linda, what do you think about inviting Kevin Simpson to that meeting? Kevin Simpson is a retired law enforcement who is now the chairman of school security administration for the Hinsdale schools. So I'd like to hear a little bit from an outside agency about encryption and things like that. So does anyone have any objections to that?
So Kevin Simpson sits on, I do too, but because Kevin's on this committee, there's a STARCOM advisory committee for school safety. And he's on that committee. It's a statewide committee looking at interoperability and some of the other pieces of equipment that are out there. So it might be handy to have him come and tell you what's happening on that side in terms of radio. So we can invite him to the next meeting or the meeting after that, either way. Or have him just be invited to add input, whatever your preference.
Will our new members be officially members of the PAC?
By the 17th, yeah, by the 17th, yes.
Okay, all right. Does anyone object to inviting Kevin? I'd like to hear what he has to say. Okay,
Do we have to listen to him talk, or can he just stay there? That'd be my only feedback.
I can only join by Zoom. We don't want him present. Hey, anyways, Linda, will you invite him then?
We will take care of that.
All right. And is May 17th, 9 a.m. good for everyone? Okay. All right, then I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, those in favor? Aye.
It's supposed to be a roll call. Hayden,
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
Hayden,
Yes.
Harmon,
Yes.
Gorski,
Aye.
Kramer.
Aye.
All righty.
All right, thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
All right.
See y'all.